welcome back to another video on my channel. In this video, I'll be guiding on how to use information barriers with SharePoint Online sites. I'm not going to talk about licensing and admin roles requirement in this video, since I have already covered all those topics in my last video. I'll leave the link for that video in the description and in the I button, so you can go through it to get complete understanding on how to create and apply information barriers policy. Alright, so let's get into it. I would now like to share information about the collaboration activities that can be prevented with information barriers policy in SharePoint sites. So here is the complete list of activities as we can see on the screen: adding a user to a site, user access to a site, and sharing a site or site content with other users. Okay. Now let me discuss about the information barriers modes that are available in SharePoint sites. So we have got 4 modes that are currently supported: open, implicit, explicit, and owner moderated. So in this video, I'll talk about the first 3, but I'll not talk about the last one, which is owner moderated, since this mode is still in preview and it's not working as expected. Okay, so moving on. Let me walk through about information barriers modes in SharePoint Online. So the first one is open. So any SharePoint site that does not have a segment associated with it, then the information barrier mode is set as open by default. In this mode, site and its content can be shared based on the information barrier policy of user. For example, let's say we have an IB policy to prevent communication and collaboration between finance and IT department. Now, if a user from finance department tries to share a file with IT user, he won't be able to. Similarly, if a user who does not belong to any segment tries to share a file with any user across the organization, he will have no issues. Further, any user who has permissions to access this site can do so without any issues. Let me talk about implicit now. When a SharePoint site is provisioned as part of a new team creation, then the information barrier mode is set as implicit, and even SharePoint admin or global admin cannot manage segments for such sites. The only sharing function that works in implicit mode is people with existing link. Okay? And only those users who are member of the Microsoft 365 group connected to the site can access the site. Okay? So no other users will have permissions to access it. Let me now discuss about explicit. So when a segment is added to a SharePoint site by an admin or via end user site creation experience, then the site information barrier mode is set as explicit. In explicit mode, only sharing options that are available to users are people with existing link and specific people. Further, only those users whose segment matches that of SharePoint site can access the site, given they have the required permissions. This just means even if someone who has permissions to access the site, but if their segment do not match that of SharePoint site, then they'll not be able to access it. So I'll show you how you can view the mode of any particular SharePoint site on PowerShell. Okay, let me now jump into demo. Alright, now I'm currently connected to the SharePoint Online PowerShell module. And before we start using information barriers with SharePoint Online, we have to run this PowerShell command, which is set-spo tenant space hyphen information barrier suspension to false. Once you run this command, this will start showing up segments on SharePoint Online sites that I'll show you in a bit. I'm currently logged in to the SharePoint Admin Center, and if I open any of the SharePoint site, I'll show you where exactly we can see segments. So as you can see, Under policies, we now have an option wherein we can define segments for each SharePoint site. Okay. All right, moving on. Right now, I'm logged into the SharePoint Admin Center, and as I mentioned earlier, for any SharePoint site that does not have a segment associated with it, then the information barrier mode is set as open. So I'll open this SharePoint site called Legal Doc Library, and as you can see, this segment says none. All right, let me now check the information barrier mode of this site on PowerShell. Okay, so I just ran this command, which is get-spo site, followed by the site URL, and then the switch information barrier mode. As you can see, it says open. As we have seen that the information barrier mode of this site is set as open, and we learned earlier that if the information barrier mode is set as open, then the site and its content can be shared based on the information barrier policy of user. Okay. I'm currently logged in with a user called Adam, who belongs to the finance department. And since we already have an IB policy to block communication and collaboration between IT and finance department, let's see what happens when Adam tries to share a file with one of the IT users. So before I do that, let me just show you the information barrier policy. Okay, so as you can see, we have policy to block communication and collaboration between IT and finance user, and both of these policies are active. So let me open this particular SharePoint site. All right, let me go to documents. So Adam, being a finance user, is now going to try and share this file with one of the IT department users. So as you can see, if I'm trying to find IT user 1, it's just not at all finding it. And if I try to find any other user who does not belong to IT department, then I have no issues. So this now confirms that if the information barrier mode is set as open, then site and its content can be shared based on the information barrier policy of user who's trying to share files. Okay. Alright, now I'll show you how implicit information barrier mode works. As we learned earlier, when a site is provisioned as part of a new team creation, then the site's information barrier mode is set as implicit. Okay, so as you can see on the screen, there is a site called Ron's Master, and we can also see a Teams icon right next to the URL. So this confirms that this site was provisioned as part of a new team creation. So let me open this site. So if I go to policies, I can see that the segment option is grayed out. So we also discussed earlier that for any SharePoint site whose information barrier mode is set as implicit, so for those sites, neither global admin nor a SharePoint admin can manage segments. So this now verifies the statement. Let me take you to PowerShell now so we can see what's the information barrier mode for this particular SharePoint site. So the command that we'll need to run is get-spo site followed by the identity, which would be the URL of SharePoint site, and then the switch that we need to use is information barrier. Now we can see the information barrier mode of this particular site, which is connected to Microsoft 365 group, is implicit. Okay. And if someone needs to have permission on this particular SharePoint site, then the team owner will need to add that user to the Microsoft 365 group, which is connected to this SharePoint site. Okay. All right, let me try to open this site now. I am now accessing Ron's master SharePoint site, whose information barrier mode is set as implicit, as we just saw. I'll now try to share a document and see what all sharing options are available to me. So let me click Documents, and then I'll open General folder. Okay, so here if I try to share this file, so the only option I have is people with existing access can use this link. So if I click on it, you can see all the other options are grayed out. That means only those users who have access to this particular folder can view and manage all the documents. So this confirms that only those users who are member of the Microsoft 365 group connected to this site can access this particular folder and all the files within it. Okay, now let's talk about explicit. I will now show you how the explicit information barrier mode works. So let me open this site first and see if there is any segment associated with it. Okay, as you can see, this site does not have any segment associated. So let me just check what's the information barrier mode of this site looks like. So I'm just going to run a command to see the information barrier mode for that particular site, which is called as research. As you can see, this currently shows as open. Now let me assign a segment and then see what would be the information barrier mode for this particular site. I'm now going to assign a segment to this site. So I'll click Edit. Let me assign finance users, save. Okay, so this site has been updated. Let me go back to PowerShell and now check the status. I'm going to run the same command again. Alright, now as you can see, the information barrier mode has been changed to explicit. Okay, so let me access this site now. As we learned earlier that if the information barrier mode of a site is set as explicit, then only those users whose segment matches that of the SharePoint site segment can access the SharePoint site, given they have required permissions. So as of now, I'm currently logged in with one of the finance user on this research SharePoint site. Let me show you. As you can see, this is one of the finance users. Now, let me try to share a document with a user of some other segment. Let me click share and let me click on, let me try to search Matt. So Matt belongs to IT, and as you can see, I cannot search for him. Now, if I try to search for Adam, who is also a finance user, I can find him and I have no issues. So now let me try to search another user called as HR. Okay, so I cannot find any HR user. So as you can see, I cannot find any other user besides those whose segment is finance. Okay, and if I click on this sharing link, you can see the first two options are not available with explicit mode. That is anyone with the link and people in Signlila with the link. So Signlila is nothing but the organization name. Okay. All right. As we just saw how explicit information barrier mode works in SharePoint Online sites, I remember mentioning earlier that even if someone has permissions to access a site whose information barrier mode is explicit, but if their segment do not match that of the site, then they cannot access the site. So let me open the research site once again and show you the segment, which is finance, as we assigned it earlier. Now, as you can see, there is another user called Sandy who has admin permissions on the site. However, Sandy's segment is not finance. He belongs to HR. Let me show you that. So as you can see, I have currently got the Sandy's profile open on Azure AD, and we can see his department is HR. Okay, so let me try to access this site from Sandy's profile. As you can see, I'm currently logged in as Sandy. So let me try to open this site. Alright, as you can see, he just got an error. This is because his segment is not matching up with the site segment, even though he has permissions. So that's the security feature we get if the information barrier mode of a site is explicit. Alright, that's all I had for this video. I hope you liked this video, and if you do, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, as I regularly post informative videos like this. Please do share this video with your friends who are looking to gain knowledge on Microsoft 365 ecosystem. And thanks again. Bye for now.